Hello and welcome to the Khan's Den podcast. This is a place to discuss steppe history and all things Turkic, from the earliest steppe people to the rise of mighty civilizations such as the Gök Turks, Uyghurs, and Mongols. You can listen to all episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Without further ado, here's your host, Emre.
If I learned one thing ever since studying history at university, it's that history is not black and white. The history that I became accustomed with is full of tropes and narratives that were made centuries later, not always but often distorting the facts and paving the way for clichés about entire peoples and cultures. In the process, many personal stories, details, and even entire events were forever lost in time. But thankfully, some sources remain, allowing us to reconstruct the past as it actually took place. And that's the reason why we are able to explore the Turko-Roman alliance, a political pact that was very well documented in late antiquity but lost its importance simply due to being shoved aside and ignored in the following centuries. In the last episode, I explained to you how this alliance was formed. We saw that the Gök Turks had expanded to West and Central Asia and got into conflict with the Sasanian Persians. The Sogdians, now under Gök Turk suzerainty, capitalized on this friction and traveled to Constantinople to forge a pact with the Eastern Roman Empire in the name of the Turks. In this second episode, I wanted to add a few details to that story that were left out. Then, we are gonna jump in time and re-engage with the Turks and Romans in the 620s, when both peoples met on the battlefield, not to attack each other, but fight together against their common enemy, Persia. And before we begin, here's a friendly reminder that you can support me by becoming a member on YouTube or Patreon. All members receive my regular video documentaries a day earlier, with members on the higher tiers getting 2 to 3 days early access. Within the past few months, we have gathered quite a lot of supporters, and I am thankful for each and everyone's support. That being said, let's begin with episode 2 of the new and improved Khan's Den podcast. So we already discussed the envoy led by the influential Sogdian man Manyak from Bukhara in Uzbekistan to Constantinople, then capital of the Eastern Romans. But we should delve a bit deeper into the story. The main characters of this chapter are Istemi, the king of the Gök Turks in Central Asia, the aforementioned Manyak and his Greek counterpart Semalkos, and a certain Justin II. Justin was, contrary to what I said last time, of course not the son, but the nephew of Justinian the Great. He reigned as Roman emperor from 565 to 578, and unlike his uncle, Justin's reign was marked by military and political struggles. He faced significant challenges, including losing parts of Italy to the Lombards, a Germanic people who invaded in 568, the year when Manyak arrived at his court. Justin's reign also witnessed conflict with the Sasanian Empire, losing Byzantine territories in the east. His internal policies were characterized by religious intolerance, particularly towards the Monophysite Christians in the empire. While it is said that his stance exacerbated internal divisions and weakened the empire's unity, for us this could be of importance, because interestingly, when Manyak and his entourage arrived, they were warmly and patiently greeted by Justin. It is even recorded that Justin questioned the Sogdian guest with great interest about the people who inhabited the Gök Turk Empire, and probably also wanted to know about the foreign policy of Istemi's reign. Justin asked detailed questions about the level of civilization of the Hephthalites. Of course, it turned out that Manyak and his entourage had not come on behalf of the White Huns, who Istemi had already subjugated. The ensuing dialogue between the envoys and the Byzantine emperor reveals the intentions of both sides. "So, you have taken all the powers of the Hephthalites as your own?" asked the emperor, addressing the Turks. "Completely," the Turks replied. "Do the Hephthalites actually live in villages or towns?" "In cities, my lord," replied the envoys. "Then," concluded the emperor, "it is clear that you have now become the masters of all those cities." "Indeed," said the Turks. The emperor then asked, "Tell us whether the Avars are the subjects of your rule." Now, by the Avars, Justin most likely meant those Ruran who had fled from the Turks and mixed with the actual Avars in Europe. These Avars were called Apart by the Turks. They are, O Emperor, some still obey us. Those who fled from us probably number 20,000. Then the Turks listed all the tribes and subjects of their rule and proposed to the emperor a defensive and at the same time offensive alliance between Turks and Romans. They added that the Turks were willing to crush all those opponents of the Romans who disputed their territory. Suddenly, Maniak raised his hand, the others did the same, and they all assured the emperor that they were speaking sincerely. Should they ever violate this oath and deceive the emperor, they themselves and even their lord, Istemi, would be cursed forever. From this dialogue, we can glean two new important factors in the Turks' willingness to ally with the Romans. We have already mentioned the economic component, but in addition, the Turks were in conflict with the Persians. By entering into this alliance, the Romans would have to come to the aid of the Turks in the event of a, let's say, Turko-Persian war, provided that the Turks upheld their end of the bargain. Conversely, this also applied to the Turks if another war broke out between Constantinople and Ctesiphon, which was the capital of the Persians. The third factor, however, was the aforementioned Avars or Ruran. The Sogdian Turkic envoy explicitly stated that Istemi was in pursuit of about 20,000 Avars, but these Avars had received a promise of protection from the Romans shortly before. It is possible that Istemi hoped that a Turko-Roman alliance would cause the emperor in Constantinople to refrain from friendly relations with the Avars. If the Avars were to attack the Romans, for example, to secure a piece of land in Pannonia or Dacia as a new settlement area, and then, of course, to get to safety from the Turks, then the Turks would have to come to Rome's aid anyway. This would, of course, be purely defensive. Wink, wink. The second detail that I reckon to be interesting and important for our understanding of the Turko-Roman alliance is, well, you already know of the quality of Turkic or Heptalite art that Semalkos, the Greek diplomat, had seen with his own eyes in the Göktürk realm. But did you know that 5 more envoys are recorded to have traveled to Central Asia? The last envoy was the one of Valentinos, the poor guy who Tamgan and Tardush had humbled because the Romans had broken their promise towards the Turks of never ever aiding the Avars again. Interestingly, Rome's relations to the Avars were already crumbling, yet the Turks had gotten very angry with their partners. My theory is that the Turks had actually expected the Romans to directly attack the Avars, perhaps even removing them from Europe into the hands of the Göktürks, which of course would have been very difficult to accomplish for the Romans. The Romans had already been engaging in military activities against Persia, but so did the Turks. In the years 588 and 589, in the middle of the Göktürk civil war, a certain Turkic ruler decided to directly invade Persian territory, without any Roman help from the west. Baga, the concurrent Khagan of the Göktürks, crossed the Oxus River, the Amudarya, with a large Turkic army, and was joined by Heptalite warriors. Together, they conquered the cities of Balkh, Herat, Talakan, and Badghis, all located in Bactria, the northern part of modern-day Afghanistan. Baga most certainly did what Istemi, back then, had not seen as necessary: a full-fledged war with the Sasanian Empire. The Göktürks expanded westward beyond Afghanistan to Hyrkania in northern Iran. Here, the current Persian king Hormuzd IV, son of King Khosrau and Kayan, the daughter of Istemi, mobilized an army against them. Despite his Turkic lineage, Hormuzd opposed the Central Asian Turks, sending General Bahram Chobin to launch a major counterattack. And in April 588, Bahram even decisively defeated the Turks at the Battle of Hyrkanian Rock, reportedly killing Baga himself. The details of the battle, including the number of soldiers and casualties, are unclear, with exaggerated claims of 12,000 Iranian soldiers versus 300,000 Turks. It is of course more likely that the Persian side numbered 10,000 men and the Turkic side 10,000, maybe up to 15,000. In 589, Bahram recaptured Herat in Afghanistan, reportedly seizing the Khagan's golden throne and reaching Bukhara. However, a civil war in Iran saw Bahram declare himself the new Persian king of kings, leading to his defeat by Khosrau II, the new Persian king, who was ironically supported by the Romans. And ironically, Bahram fled to his former enemies next, to the Turks, who welcomed him. In Suyab, or Ordukent, the capital of the Western Gökturks, he became a respected general, and even at one point in time uncovered a conspiracy within the Ashina dynasty which hindered the assassination of Tartush. Later, Khosrau had Bahram poisoned by way of a Persian agent. Persian rule over the cities of Sogdia and Baktia was not to last long, but for the time being, these regions indeed became part of the Persian domain. Along the Silk Road would then revert back to Turkic rule after the Second Turko-Persian War, which probably happened in 606 or 607. Now, during these conflicts, the Romans did not assist. In fact, for a very long time after the last envoy Valentinos, seemingly nothing noteworthy transpired between Constantinople and Ordukent. This is a very curious case because after rather intensive diplomatic exchange and the siege of several Roman cities on Crimea by the Turks, you'd think that either both sides would seriously go to war against each other or try to ease tensions. It is likely that the latter occurred, as none of the sources report any sort of military confrontation between Roman and Göktürk armies. None at all. But this is not the end of the Turko-Roman alliance. To the contrary, it was just about to pick up. As we jump 40 years forward on our timeline, we witness a Roman and a Göktürk leader gaining massive power and influence at the same time. Heraklius in the west and Tong Yapgu in the east. Heraklius came to power as the co-leader of an anti-emperor revolt in 608. Breaking a tradition of sedentary monarchy, he soon started to personally lead military campaigns. As the new supreme commander, he carried serious religious Christian undertones. His rise to power was marked by establishing a new ruling dynasty, effective handling of internal political and external military crises, innovative economic measures, and significant contributions to Roman military strategy. Because in 602, the Romans had once again entered a war against Sasanian Persia. But this war spanned nearly 3 decades, culminating in 627 and 628. After being nearly defeated by the Persian troops, who had advanced as far as Constantinople, Heraklius slowly turned the tables and conducted a successful counterattack. Now, Romans and Persians were once again fighting for control of the greater Caucasus area. This is where the Göktürks came into play, once again and for the very last time. By now, the Western Göktürk Empire had become the more powerful of both Turkic states, easily surpassing the Eastern Göktürks. It had absorbed Bactria after the Second Turko-Persian War, which I mentioned earlier, and was radiating Turkic influence into Western and even Southern Asia. But great conquests had been a thing of the past, it seemed. Just then, Tong Yapgu became the new king of the Western Turks. His name meant either Great Lion or, more simply, Hero. In the upcoming battle, he would definitely live up to his name. After having unified the more or less restless Turkic tribes from Kazakhstan to Uzbekistan, Tong Yapgu gathered all of their soldiers to start the largest Turkic military campaign so far. During this last war against Persia, the Göktürks along the Hephthalites had also reached Iranian territory, even arriving in Rai. For some unknown reason, the king in the west at that time, Shigui, had the army withdrawn back to Central Asia. As a result, the Armenian general of the Sassanids, a certain Bagratuni, was able to defeat without difficulty the troops of the Hephthalites, still vassals of the Göktürks, near Balkh in Afghanistan. 8 years later, the Göktürks then regained control of Afghanistan, now under the leadership of the mentioned Tong Yapgu. Emperor Heraklius, who had re-established contacts with the Turks, had promised Tong-Yapgu gifts and booty in the Caucasus if he had defeated the Persians there. Tong then sent an army of 1,000 men through dangerous Persian territory to deliver this very message to the emperor. I shall take revenge on your enemies and come to your aid with my valiant troops. Then, Tong-Yapgu ordered Börüşat, his nephew, into battle. In 627, the latter besieged the fortified city of Derbent in Dagestan, which is today part of Russia, with an army described in the Armenian sources as Khazar. It is not a coincidence that the Khazars, a few years later, indeed established their own empire in this very area, the northern Caucasus. From here, the Turks were able to invade Caucasian Albania, not to be confused with modern-day Albania on the Balkans, and move into Persia. These Khazars were victorious and occupied numerous settlements. When the Romans joined from Anatolia, the Gökturks besieged Tiflis in the kingdom of Iberia, also not to be confused with the Iberian Peninsula of Spain and Portugal. Heraclius and Tong-Yapgu then met in a camp on the Armenian highlands, embraced respectfully and gave each other gifts. The Turks withdrew after 2 months, and the Romans marched to Nineveh in Iraq, where they triumphed over the Persian army. Encouraged, Tong-Yapgu returned, successfully invaded Tiflis, and had the city sacked once and for all. His tax plans indicate that he intended to incorporate the Caucasus into his empire permanently rather than simply turning back after plundering. 3 years later, when the Persians launched a counterattack, the Gökturk general Chorpan Tarkan moved into Armenia, lured the 10,000 Persians into a trap, and utterly destroyed them in battle. But suddenly, he and the other Turks retreated to the steppes. Tong-Yapgu had been murdered, by whom is disputed. According to Christopher Baumer, the murderer, even more tragically, was Tong-Yapgu's own son. Others think it had been his uncle. His tragic end notwithstanding, Tong-Yapgu went down in history as the Gökturk conqueror of the Caucasus, along with his Roman ally Heraclius. But he could have achieved much more, perhaps for his empire and for his people, had he not been killed by his own flesh and blood. This epic story is indeed full of myths and legends, like the entire history of the Gökturk Empire. Yet it is a fitting and definitive end to the alliance between the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as Byzantium, like you guys know, and the Göktürk Khaganate. But even still, this was not the last time that a Roman or Greek and a Turkic people would meet. In fact, not very far from the battlefields, somewhere in Bactria that had been integrated by the Gökturks, a new Turkic dynasty would soon rise to power. Like the Khazars in the Caucasus, these warriors would also take on local customs and new religions. Their greatest ruler, though, was to be bestowed the honorific title Caesar of Rome, in Turkic Phromo Kesara. But to the local population and their neighbors, they were simply known as Turk Shahi, the Turk kings.
Thank you for listening to the Khan's Den podcast. New episodes are uploaded on a weekly basis, usually Thursdays or Fridays. Check in next time when we explore not only history itself, but the way it was presented, and how Emre experiences firsthand how cliched narratives can be used to put a spin on historical events and even entire nations.